Hey everyone, this is Kieran. Today's exercise is looking at the single leg rise, or basically getting up from a chair, about a chair height, with one leg. It's a common test used for endurance testing around like knee rehab, but also it has some relationships with your quadricep strength. So it's a really nice test to use, and then you can also use it as an exercise if you feel like you need to work on your test results. When you get any sort of injury, it is useful to have something called normative values to help guide rehab. So you might injure a particular joint or a particular muscle, and then you're thinking, well, how strong does this muscle need to get back to? Or what kind of range of motion should this joint be able to do? Particularly if you don't know your normal before the injury, because ultimately your normal is the reference value. If we're looking at, say, some studies though, you need to consider if the study population, so the participants that were studied, capture you. And that's important because if the normative value is in, say, like a 20-year-old athlete, and you're not that person, or you don't fit that profile, then that normative value may not apply to you. So just thinking a little bit about how these normative values are just something to aim towards, but not always gospel, right? In this particular test/exercise we're going to go over, we're talking about a one-leg rise test. Others might know it as like a single leg rise from a chair. It's a single leg squat in disguise, except we're focusing on some external constraints like the chair. If we're looking at normative values, most of the studies are roughly sort of 25 to 35, and we're seeing scores around, sort of mid-20s, with deviations upwards of, sort of 15 each direction. So you might see someone score 50 reps, and that might be a little bit more to do with motivation and how keen someone is to push it, versus someone might be on the lower end, and that could just be maybe the stage of injury they're at, or they just never trained that, or they're not that active. Equally, there's some studies looking at people who've had ACL reconstructions, and then they're checking them in their 40s and saying, okay, they've got some osteoarthritic changes in their knee joint. What is their score now? And do we see a difference in the reconstructed knee versus the non-reconstructed knee in this particular test? And it looks like they do, and that there's a relationship between that test score and maybe the severity of the osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis is a complex pathology. It's not something that is biomechanically or completely a biomechanical issue. There's inflammatory components too, and lifestyle factors, and dietary aspects, and all sorts of stuff. But it's just some things to consider, so that when you're thinking about the numbers I'm talking about and how we're going to do this test and why you're going to do this test, that you're just making sure it relates to you. And if the populations don't quite sound like you, then you're just using these numbers as a guideline. But we've got quite a wide range, right? Like sort of mid-20s to 50s is a reasonably good score. Like if you're falling in between that, it's probably capturing most humans, right? Okay, so let's get into the test. Enough of me sort of rambling on about research and statistics. If you want to get really particular about how the tests were conducted, and there is value in that. So if you think you're going to redo this test repeatedly over time, so maybe let's say every couple months, you kind of want to make sure you're doing the same test, right? So then you know that the result that's changing is truly because of your efforts or the programming. And when it comes to exercise prescription and the benefits that we see from it, there's a lot of variables to consider, and scores can fluctuate over time. But to improve our reliability, we can at least start with trying to set up the same environment. Most of the studies are sitting around like the mids 400, 450 mil-ish area. For those not familiar with the metric system, what are we talking about there? So roughly 2.5 centimeters an inch. We're talking about 45 centimeters. So you can kind of do the math on that. That, for most people anyway, though, is going to be roughly about a chair height. So if you've got a chair, chances are it's sitting about that height. Now, simply, the test is that you cross your arms and choose whichever leg, and then you're going to stand up. And then when you're coming down, you're trying to be controlled about it. So you're not just going to fall down. So you're coming up, and as you can see, it's a little bit wobbly, but I'm starting to coordinate a little bit. And then you're going up and down. And you're just trying to see how many you can do until you get to the point where you're like, I can't do another, all right? So up and down, up and down. And like I said, there's value in this, particularly with tracking over a long-term rehab program for someone with a big knee injury, and making sure you get above those sort of reps around 22 plus, ideally sitting into the mid to high 20s. So hope you guys found that useful, something to orientate you with some knee rehab. There's a lot of exercises that can help make this one better. Equally though, if you found it tough, do this exercise. Some alternatives would be to raise the height of the chair. If you can't do a single rep at all, then raise the height. Choose something a little bit higher that allows you to do, probably at least 10 reps or so to start with. That can get you started on that journey. And then over time, drop down the height. A couple times a week of exposure is probably going to be enough. Looking for a sense of fatigue and effort. So as long as you're feeling like you're getting a little bit tired doing it, and as long as you feel like it's effortful, then you're going to get stronger and you're going to grow some muscle and progress your endurance as well. So all the best with this one, and good luck with your rehab. If you like this video, then please hit like below. Otherwise, to check out more of our content in the future, you can subscribe to our channel by clicking our logo over here. And to check out our latest video, click up here.